Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings, to the WeAreChange news show. And in this video, we are going to give you the 680th, 910,000th time why you shouldn't trust the mainstream media, specifically MSNBC. And this is very important today as we are hearing more rumblings about Hillary Clinton running for president again in 2020. She is still trying to make herself relevant by being on speaking tours, touting her super PAC, and, you know, trying to pass as the average common folk, even flying commercial recently to a flight in New York City, and not, of course, the elitist, corrupt, scandal-ridden couple that they are. And if you look at all the news organizations out there, MSNBC has been the biggest propagandists for both Bill and Hillary Clinton. And personally, from my perspective, which I hope you understand from watching this video, they are one of the most unhinged, diabolical, pro-war, pro-establishment, corporate, neoliberal trash news organization out there, filled with the most shills. And with their recent actions, starting beef with people like Glen Greenwald, pushing for tensions with Russia, and even a former anchor passing away recently, this is highlighted more than ever. Now, before we get into that, just know that this independent media organization is sponsored and funded in part by you. On our website, wearechange.org/donate, where you could fund this independent media operation through cryptocurrencies or even regular fiat. And with your help and contributions, we don't have to be literal prostitutes like MSNBC is for the corporations or big government. And at the same time, share news stories that you wouldn't regularly hear, do some investigative reporting, and actually make you think for yourself and have an open mind, which, unlike MSNBC, where one of their own anchors even publicly on air said that it was their job to control exactly what people think. Now, continuing on with this story, this is just one thin layer of the delusional thought process that happens at MSNBC. And the insanity gets even crazier when you look at the recent coverage by MSNBC, specifically when it comes to the subject of Russia, with hyperbolic content like this that they just released a few days ago, saying that, quote, the Republican Party has surrendered to Russia, where one of their hired analysts, Malcolm Nance, hysterically ranted about Donald Trump with the Nazis and white supremacists, and also endorsing the KGB for some reason. All, of course, just sensational talk with no actual evidence backing it, except for their hyperbolic opinions on this issue. And of course, the same people who are contributing to that content on MSNBC are also right now starting fights with Glen Greenwald. And Glen Greenwald, who's a journalist himself, just made a recent trip to Russia in order to, quote, combat the U.S. toxic view of that country. And this, of course, has spurred Malcolm Nance, who describes himself as a, quote, 36-year intelligence expert and MSNBC employee, to go off on Twitter and say that Glen Greenwald is, quote, an agent of Trump in Moscow, that he, quote, helped Snowden defect, covers for WikiLeaks attacks on democracy, and shills for Fox News, while at the same time in the Kremlin's pocket. Again, just hyperbolic opinions with, of course, no evidence proving any of the allegations that he just made against Glen Greenwald. And of course, Glen Greenwald responded in a very extensive piece in The Intercept with a story titled, MSNBC does not merely permit fabrications against Democratic Party critics, it encourages and rewards them. And in my opinion, he made a very solid case, because it was the same, quote, 36-year intelligence expert that previously said that Putin was going to invade Ukraine in October last year, and he thought Jill Stein had a show on RT, Russia Today. And guess what? He was wrong. And to make the matter worse, he never even retracted or apologized for spreading fake news and lying to his audience. Now, of course, Glen Greenwald is also exposing how other news organizations are just outright fabricating quotes from him and claiming that he, quote, voiced support for the Russian government, when in reality he did no such thing. People like Malcolm Nance, who use these underhanded techniques that, of course, are regurgitated and promoted by his fellow co-workers, are really just using really dirty journalistic tricks and showing their faces as propagandists, which MSNBC knowingly allows to happen on their network. And that is just one incident out of many where MSNBC and their analysts and experts were just caught blatantly lying, manipulating facts, using propaganda on their own audience. And the story really was highlighted for me, especially with what happened last week with the passing of one of their anchors, Ed Schultz. Now, Ed was known as kind of a progressive working people broadcaster, which I met a few times but never knew personally. And he worked at MSNBC for a long time, later in his career transitioning to RT, Russia Today. And we saw a lot of powerful tributes to Ed Schultz and the life he lived, especially from people like Bernie Sanders, and a lot of other progressives who viewed him as a champ for the American worker. And some mainstream media tributes, with some news organizations even talking about how he worked for, quote, Kremlin-funded RT America, with not that much coverage from MSNBC, which he was best known for. And this is because Ed Schultz and his departure from MSNBC exposed a very dark side of that news network. Now, very few people are talking about this, especially surrounding his death, but MSNBC never wanted Ed Schultz's working class audience. They have previously even cut off Bernie Sanders when he was condemning the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which actually brought together people from the left and right in agreement against the corporatist TPP deal. And it was mainly Ed Schultz who was one of the only news anchors to extensively and fairly cover the TPP, which of course got him in trouble with the network that only expanded when he was fired from MSNBC for supporting Bernie Sanders and not crooked Hillary Clinton, which Ed Schultz, after being fired in 2015, exposed and honorably came out and told the world what was happening behind the scenes at MSNBC. For, of course, the pro-Hillary Clinton, pro-establishment bias that they forced their anchors to regurgitate to their audience. He even went on record about some of the fights that happened internally where MSNBC executives were cutting pieces and stories that he had produced about Bernie Sanders, specifically so he would not give any coverage of Bernie Sanders on MSNBC. And Ed Schultz even says himself, MSNBC was, quote, in the tank for Hillary Clinton. And there's a huge significance to this story because Bernie Sanders wasn't just screwed in the DNC primaries by DNC chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who had to resign in disgrace and then later be hired by Hillary Clinton, but also from the mainstream media. And it's not just Ed Schultz and Bernie Sanders that were screwed over by the neoliberal controllers at MSNBC. It's also anyone standing against war. Just like we saw Jesse Ventura, who came out and said MSNBC bought him off, had him under contract, and silenced him because he opposed the war in Iraq. The same goes for MSNBC host Philip Donahue, which MSNBC canceled his show, which was even proven by an internal MSNBC memo that stated that Donahue should be fired because he opposed the imminent U.S. invasion of Iraq. He, of course, publicly also is speaking out against this and the suppression that happens behind the scenes with people who have anti-war voices in the mainstream media. And that is still very strongly evident with the latest MSNBC coverage, since, of course, they are almost completely ignoring the war in Yemen, which, of course, Barack Obama fostered, but now Donald Trump, which they allude to being like Hitler on their network, being a part of the KGB, is now waging, but that is not an issue for MSNBC. And this is why MSNBC is pushing such tough talk about Russia, such propaganda about Russia, in order to galvanize the American public to be for a conflict with Russia, which the United States, under Donald Trump, is already engaged with in many proxy wars. And the keys to having better relations with Russia, untangling the proxy wars and little conflicts that are happening in countries like Ukraine and Syria, ultimately lie in the US and Russia coming together and negotiating together a way to resolve these conflicts, which of course is an absolute nightmare for the corporatist warmongers, neoliberals, pigs at MSNBC. And of course, the keys to peace all rely on Putin and Trump coming together and resolving these conflicts and the proxy wars that are happening right now between Russia and the United States. Both countries have made very bold foreign policy moves, almost bringing us on the brink of conflict between these world powers, which of course would screw over everyone, but of course a fact that you will never hear on that news network. And people need to realize, when you're watching people like Rachel Maddow or Chuck Todd or Chris Matthews, you're not watching news or news anchors who are definitely not independent free thinkers, but the best order followers, script readers, and puppets where the corporatist, neoliberal, pro-war, pro-establishment fits perfectly inside of them. You're watching heartless people who have sold their issues that they cared about, their souls, to the highest bidder. And you know, that's who they are. And if you agree, share this video, especially with people who watch the mainstream media, especially MSNBC, so they could get with the program. Especially this cowardly bastard that we confronted one-on-one after he slandered this very news organization for supposedly being a right-wing racist hate group. And when I confronted him with the facts, he could even face those accusations or address them or back them up in any way, shape, or form, just cowering and running away. Because they're lying propagandist cowards and repeaters who don't even back up what they say. To be fair, Bill O'Reilly once described this news organization as a jihad-loving liberal organization, so I guess we must be doing something right. But in my opinion, MSNBC definitely takes the cake when it comes to being corporatist government whores that they are. So yeah, that video is going to be in the description below, so you guys could check it out after this one. And again, no big money, corporate Comcast money here, just ultimately you guys supporting us and keeping us running. And if it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be here. And that's why I love you guys. Thank you again so much for watching. Stay tuned for more.